There it says live. Hi.
Who knows if any of this is actually live? Let's just pretend it is. Hello, everyone. We might be live. We might not. The technology is baffling to me, but I'm gradually getting there. My name is Stephen Aaron, and today joining me on the Traditional Publishing live stream is Michelle Schusterman for the first time. We've been kind of passing each other and talking on each other's videos and in the comments on about traditional publishing, and we're one of only half a dozen traditionally published authors, maybe, on AuthorTube, I think.
That I can see.
So that's quite an interesting thing. We're suddenly kind of like bumping into each other and be like, oh yeah, it's a bit similar. So my audience is not just science fiction and fantasy, but can you introduce yourself and give a bit of an overview to those who haven't come across you before, please?
Absolutely. Hello, guys. My name is Michelle Schusterman. So I'm mostly a middle grade author. I do have one young adult novel that's also out. I am traditionally published. I have most of my books are with Penguin Random House. I've got quite a few middle grades with Scholastic right now, and one series that is with Little Brown, which is Hachette. And I think I got my first book deal. My first book came out in 2014, so I've been doing this for quite a while. I also do a lot of ghostwriting, both for like private clients and also for publishers. And I do a lot of IP work, which is short version where publishers come up with a premise and like a little synopsis and then hire me to actually write the book. Sometimes I get to put my name on it. Sometimes it's under another name, kind of like ghostwriting. Can be like a blend of the two. So that's me. And I'm happy to be here, Stephen.
The 2014, so my debut came out 2015, so pretty close. Yeah, so I got my agent in 2013, spent a year working on the book, then we pitched it to the publishers, then we spent a year editing it. So it was 2015 my debut came out. So similar time then.
Very similar. No, I signed with my agent in 2010. And then I went on sub and came real close, got an offer that got rescinded. That was super fun. The editor jumped the gun, made the offer to my agent, but she hadn't actually gone through acquisitions yet. It was pretty brutal. And then I spent a year writing another book that my agent kept giving me advice on how to rewrite it, and I wasn't taking it because I was still pretty new and I was like stubbornly clinging to my old version, so that book never went on submission. So it took me a while to actually get the deal.
Yeah, it's not unique though. You know, I've spoken to other authors who've had an agent for a year or two or even longer, and they've got our books have gone out on submission. Nothing happens. It doesn't, for whatever reason, you know, timing or something in the market is too similar. It doesn't get picked up. So then you have to kind of go back to the well and start over, which is just soil destroying because you've got the agent. That's the first major step. Everyone thinks, oh, it's gravy after that. You've done it, and then you're straight in. It's like,
even if you hear people say this. Even if you know better, you think to yourself, I have an agent. It's all good from here. I'm going to get all the tools. I'm never going to struggle again. All the contracts are going to rain down on me. It's like, nope, it's not that way necessarily.
No. It's tough.
I'm sorry. I just saw CO's here. Hi, CO. I see a lot of familiar people. Okay.
A lot of people asking questions. So if you've got any questions, you should say post them in the comments and we'll try and get to them. We've had some already. Do you want to tackle this Penguin Random House one? Let's see. So Stephen's already gone straight in there asking about how much was your first advance from Penguin Random House and how much was your last?
I don't know why, but I love this question. I'm like, me like this is the kind of stuff I wanted to know too when I was starting out. Like, I want to know what the money is. Okay, so Stephen, my first book deal was with Penguin Random House, and it was a 4-book series, which sounds like super fancy, but the money wasn't huge. It wasn't bad. I got $8,000 per book for that. And it was a paperback series. There was no hardcover version. You usually do get a slightly lower advance if it's going to be paperback only, at least in my experience and from what I've heard. And so, that was a total of a $32,000 contract for 4 books. I will also say that those 4 books were rapid released all in 1 year. They all came out in 2014. It was a little bit intense. But it was like, I got the deal at the end of 2011 and the first one came out in like the beginning of 2014. So it was like I spent 2 years writing them, revising them, copy editing them kind of all at the same time. And then they were all done. And then all of a sudden they were like bursting out into the world in this one crazy year. It was very strange. And then my last advance from Penguin Random House, let me think. That was also a 2-book deal, 2 standalone novels. This was like 2017, 18. Middle grade novels. One is called Olive and the Backstage Ghost, and the other one is Spell and Spindle. And that was much better. I got 25,000 per book on that. So it was a $50,000 contract. And there you go. You know the numbers.
There you go. You've had some numbers. Now you know. Now you know. With me, with Orbit, they did a similar thing with you in that for some debuts, they give you a longer lead time up front. So my first trilogy came out in 12 calendar months, but I had longer to work on it. So I was working on 3 books at the same time like you. So I was doing the final bits on 1, I was writing 2, I was planning 3, and then you kind of shuffle along the kind of conveyor belt and do all of them at the same time. And I think mine came out like September, I don't know, April and then September or something. So every 6 months, something like that. So in 12 calendar months, I had a trilogy. And then it's like, okay, what's next? Can you do another 3 in the same time period? I'm like, no, because I'd have to write them about 3 months each. And there's no way I could do it because I was working full time then. So
no, I'm curious as to what was their reasoning behind having them close? Because with the age level I write for, the reason for that rapid release was that kids age out of series in a blink of an eye. And this particular series, it was like aimed at like 3rd, 4th graders. And they just age up into a higher level of reading so fast that it's like you don't want to do 1 book a year with them because then they're graduating high school before your series is over.
Yeah. I think the reason is, so with adult fantasy, there's a lot of books coming out every year. And if you pick up a debut, so the first book in every series always sells the best. It's just, just how it is in any series. Someone will try it. If they like it, great. They keep going. If they don't, that's how it is. And with adult fantasy, if you like a book and you think, oh, brilliant, when's the next one? And it's a year away and you're a brand new name in the industry and no one knows who you are, it can be just lost in the shuffle. So Orbit, not just me, but with others did this. They said, right, so we want them coming out every 6 calendar months. So when people don't have to wait as long. And there's that other thing of when a book comes out and then a couple months later, people start getting reviews. Then they go, oh, I'd like to pick it up. They haven't waited. They just may not know about it. Then the reviews, people start and the buzz generates, and then they pick up that first book. And when's the next one? Oh, now it's only 3 months away or 4 months away. It's trying to build momentum for a debut. I think that's why they did it. And they wanted me to do faster after that again, but like I don't have the physical time to do it. So then we had to go to 1 book a year just to keep up. That's as fast as I could do. But I think that's a debut thing for Orbit. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, because we had lots of the questions. So what's this one? Could you please discuss about creating settings suitable for the story? Like a world building question, I guess.
Let's see. Oh, I mean, you write sci-fi, so I feel like this is more for you, but I mean, not like I don't have to do world building.
So with fantasy and sci-fi, with world building, it's all about making it authentic enough that someone feels like it's slightly familiar, but you don't create too many barriers that they're constantly banging their head against something when they're trying to get in. So I did a video recently on about names for characters and places and things, and it's the idea of if every character's name is like 8 syllables long, it's not only a pain for the narrator, but someone who's reading it for the first time, they're just constantly stumbling. And so you have to kind of polish off some of the edges, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish I could remember how this was worded because it was put so succinctly, but I think one of the best pieces of world building advice I ever heard was about just knowing what your reader is going to assume and not wasting too much time describing that. So like if your book is set in another world and there's mountains, but those mountains look like our mountains, you don't have to go overly into the description of them. Focus on the things that are actually different because your reader will paint the background in their mind based on what they already know of our world and then add those details about your world that make it stand out and unique. Like I said, whoever said this said it much more succinctly than I could. Really good piece of advice.
You're right. You create a charcoal sketch and they fill in the details themselves of the stuff they know. And the stuff you don't know, I paint more details. Non-human races in fantasy, I give them more flavor. I give them distinct features or even weird names so that they do stick out a bit more and people are like, oh, what's that? It feels weird and it should if it's not human and things like that. So it's authenticity,
Yes.
for me, without it being too complicated, so that the reader doesn't just they're lost before they get into the story. I
You have
think.
to trust your reader. Your
Yeah.
reader is probably familiar with the genre you're writing in. They're smart. They read books. They can fill in a lot of blanks. Like we don't need. I think that's like one of the most common young writer or just new writer kind of mistakes, or just I don't even want to say mistake, just a trap you fall into is over description. And it's fine. You can always cut it down later, but just trust your reader. You don't have to tell them every single thing.
Yeah, it's a lot. I find it a lot easier to overwrite and cut it down than try and do it the other way. I mean, my books are all fairly lean, and I guess with writing, middle grade and young adult, it's quite a tight word count anyway, quite specific.
Yeah, I mean, some projects I do, the publisher comes to me and says it has to be for binding purposes. It can't be longer than like 50,000 words or something.
Wow.
It's short. Yeah, and that's why, like right now, I'm writing an like adult mystery novel, so it's probably going to come close to 100, and that's just like it's tripping me out in my head. It's like, oh my god, this is 4 middle grade novels. It's going to take forever.
Yeah, I worry in mine scrape like 150. That's when I think, oh, I need to trim it down a bit. And then there's people out there doing 2, 3, 400,000 words. I'm like, that's my whole trilogy. That's like everything wrapped in one. That's like, I don't know how they do it.
I don't either. I truly don't. I wrote one draft of one book. It was never published, but it did break 100. I think it was at like 108,000. And I was sweating when I finished that thing. That was so hard. It was a marathon.
Way too much. Way too much. Here's an interesting question from Anna. How much does the story allowed to share after signing a contract with the publisher? How much can you use for marketing purposes?
That is a very good question. And the answer is it's going to depend from, I think, publisher to publisher and publicist to publicist. A lot of it, I'll just be frank, like sometimes if you're lucky, you get your publisher hooks you up with like a really great, they have an on-team publicist who's really, they've got a marketing plan for your book, and they're going to tell you, here's the schedule of when we're doing things. This is when your cover reveal is going to be. Like, here is the outlet that we organized to do your cover reveal, blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes you get a book deal and your publisher does absolutely none of that. And they just send you your cover. And if you want to, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have just like gone on Amazon randomly and been like, oh, cover for my next book is up. Ta-da.
Yes, I've had that happen to me before.
There was like no reveal or anything. So it really just depends on if they really put together a real marketing plan. Now, has that been your experience too? Or
They've been pretty good. I mean, usually when we're starting to get far down the edit of the book, we then start talking about where's it going to sit on the shelf, how's it going to be marketed, what sort of, the cover obviously plays a part in that as well. We start talking about the cover early on, and then that will reflect what sort of mood the book is and the tone. Obviously the title changes depending upon that as well, so we might so there's certain common words that crop up in fantasy titles all the time, and that can kind of dictate what the flavor is as well, and the subgenre. So we talk about all of this. And so recently with Angry Robot, my current duology, we talked all this through quite a lot and decided on the plan, and blog tours and signings and all that kind of thing. So they've been brilliant. I've had a really good experience with them as a publisher.
Yeah, the times that I've had a publicist, my publisher, it's been great. They, it's when they do something for you, they really do something for you, and they will let you know what you can and cannot share. And most of the time I found that they're pretty open to hearing your ideas. Like if there's something you want to do, like some people will make like, Instagram quotes, pretty quotes from their book as like little teasers and things like that. And they're happy to like take a look at that and let you know if it's okay to share that or make sure you want to make sure you don't interfere with anything they're doing on their end. And then, like I said, sometimes they're not doing anything and you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. So sometimes they've shared things with me. Like I've said, could I have something for my Twitter banner or my Facebook thing or website? And I do stuff like that. And then, giveaways or advanced e-arcs and things like that. But I'm obviously always talking to the PR person to make sure, as you said, you don't step on their toes and just duplicate effort, because you don't want to do that. So here's a interesting. So we are going to talk about social media at some point. That's part of the plan for tonight, was to talk about social media. But I'll do one more question, and then if you've got any more, keep posting them, and we'll come back to them in a minute. So we had this question: would either of us consider participating in author mentor match if we haven't already?
Absolutely. I keep hearing about this, and I never look it up. So I don't know exactly who organizes it or what goes down, but I have done other things. I just actually finished kind of like, I think it was January through around May. I was a mentor for We Need Diverse Books mentor-mentee program. And I was matched with a middle grade fantasy aspiring author who wrote, guys, if this book doesn't get published, I will eat my phone. I mean, it was so good. It was just so fun. And it was very open for each match, each of us to work out how we were going to give feedback and how much feedback the person wanted and what they were looking for. And so I basically read the manuscript, wrote an edit letter. We messaged back and forth several times, going over like specific ways she could implement those changes. And it was a wonderful experience. So I enjoyed that. I'm sure I would like author mentor match if that is that what that is?
I think it's something similar. I'm vaguely aware of it too, but I don't know who runs it. So if people want to get in touch for either of us, we're happy to do that.
Someone just said Alexa Dunn started it, and in my head I was like, I think this is Alexa's thing. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we totally.
All right. Yeah. See, she's one of the other 6 traditionally published authors that are on YouTube on author.
Extremely good at organizing things. I went to the first conferences I went to be on like panels as an author. She had organized it. It was LeviosaCon. This was several years ago, and it was phenomenally run, and I had an absolutely wonderful time. So yeah, all yes to Alexa. Anything organized by Alexa, I'm there.
Yeah, she's really, really good. So one of the things we said we'd talk about beforehand was social media. We both sort of said in the last probably year or so, we've seen a lot of people talking about how much of a social media presence do you need to have as a traditionally published author, and if you're on submission or you're just approaching agents, what should you have, what shouldn't you have, how much do you need to do? And this is something we want to talk about, and whether some people are feeling the pressure, because I've had questions from people on my channel saying, do I have to have a website? Do you need to be on Twitter? Do you need to be on TikTok and all this kind of stuff? What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts on that are that it is a good idea to, at the very least, have just a simple website with a little information about you. You think about if someone reached out to you and wanted to work with you and you couldn't find anything about them when you Googled, it's just a little, you want to know that they're a real person. and it just looks professional to have just a website set up, like a short bio about you, just the facts, a little bit about your book, maybe. That's it. You don't have to do much. I don't think you need a social media presence. That said, I am not going to say that having a massive following somewhere isn't going to get a publisher's attention, because we have all seen evidence in the past that has actually been the case. But that's also not necessarily a good thing. And I certainly wouldn't say, unless you just like have, 500,000 Instagram followers right now at this moment, I wouldn't spend all your time and energy into trying to build that presence. I would put your energy into just writing a really good book, because ultimately that's really what's going to get you an agent and an editor, is a good book. It's not going to be your social media presence unless you've got a serious platform with a ton of people following you.
Yeah. It's also what you feel comfortable doing. Like, there's no way you'll get me on TikTok. I'm not the right person. I don't know about you, but I'm like,
I have to say, when that first started, when the book talk thing was like, oh, look at these books, blah, blah. And I looked at TikTok and I was like, I can see why people like this. It's kind of cute and kind of funny. It's not for me, but no. Lately, the more I see, every time I watch a YouTube video where they insert random TikToks and I see it, I'm like, I hate that platform. Everything, and I'm not meaning to insult anyone, but all the trendy things, like the pointing to words on your screen and the lip syncing, it's so cheesy. I don't find it entertaining at all. No, you could not get me on there. Absolutely not. If you like it, I'm sorry. I don't mean to insult you. Anybody else?
Comfortable doing this is it. Like, so I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. I'm okay on Twitter. I'm happy with that. I know how to use it. That's the other thing. Instagram, I'm learning. I'm still constantly asking people, how did you do that? What is that? How does that? I need like a course. I need like a 2-day course on how to use Instagram so I understand it, because I'm not quite there yet.
Is weird now because it keeps changing. At first, it was just here's a photo and a caption. It was a photo website, and then it tried to be YouTube when it had like IG movies, and then it tried to be TikTok when it had reels and like what's the difference between reels and shorts? Why do you need two short form video platforms on why Instagram? They're just it's like they were trying to be Vine and then they were trying to be TikTok and then they were trying to be YouTube. I don't know. I don't get it. Instagram is weird.
I like Richard's comment. TikTok. I agree. Yes, it's not for us. It's not for us. It's just so I use Twitter mostly for talking to the authors, to communicating with them who are kind of within the science fiction fantasy space, for keeping up with editors, also for news as well. So I follow a lot of agents on there, and they post news about manuscript wish list, which is good, kind of hashtag MSWL. Ask agent is another good hashtag. So sometimes if you're not sure about something, you can just search that hashtag, go back, and an agent may have answered that already, and you can just kind of scroll back through it and find it and see if it's good. And if not, some agents will say, we're going to be doing Ask an Agent thing at this time on this day, and just go and post your question. You might get a direct answer.
Yeah, it's great.
It's that kind of immediacy and the direct contact. I love it for that. But sometimes Twitter can be a scary place.
Yeah, lots of times. I'm not. I kind of have an Instagram account, but I seriously, I don't think I've put anything on there for over a year. I just can't. YouTube is the only thing I like. I actually enjoy, and that's my other rule is like, if you have fun with it, then do it. But if you feel like you're forcing yourself to do it because you think you have to build a platform, you're just going to push yourself to burn out with writing and publishing even faster. So just whatever makes you happy. That's my answer on the social media thing.
I know some authors. Go on. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't think it's gonna stand in your way of getting a book deal. If you write an awesome book, they're not gonna. It's not gonna matter that you don't have like hordes of Instagram followers. Most people don't.
No.
Maybe we could even bring back the idea of there being like mystique behind it out there. Oh, she's not online anywhere. That's interesting. Can we all go back to being hermits? That's like my ultimate dream.
It's possible. I mean, I know there's some authors that don't have a social media presence at all. They just have a website. So some have come off and some never have had it at all. And so the only way to get in contact with them is through their website. And I know a lot of them curate newsletters through their website, which is, quite a good thing, as then they're kind of building their own private list of people to email with news, which works. So that's another thing that's, if it works for them and they get people talking to them there, that's great. As long as there's some way to get in contact, and it's not like the Bill Murray thing where you have to ring up a number and leave a message and he checks his messages and he might get back to you. You don't want to be that out of touch that, that's the only way to get in contact with you.
True. Yes, absolutely true.
Okay. Let's have a look. Got some more questions. One from Richard. How often likely is it to get representation of the first piece of work you ever query?
I would love to hear actual statistics on this. I honestly don't know, but I did not get representation for the first book I queried, but I definitely know several authors who did, and their first book deal came immediately after that. Two people that back when I was very first starting out, I met my first writer friends in a forum called Absolute Right, and started a blog because this was 2008 and 9 and blogs were like still a big deal. So I met a bunch of women I had never met in real life, met them online. We started a blog together that ran for a long time, and two of those members not only got book deals but got some real big book deals. One of them was Veronica Roth. Her first book deal was Divergent, and that was pretty massive. And then the other one was Cody Keplinger, who's well published at this point, but at the time she was 17 and she got her first book deal for her very first book, and it's The Duff, which was made into a movie a few years ago. You guys might remember this. It stands for Designated Ugly Fat Friend. It was a very fun YA contemporary novel. And yeah, Cody was 17. She queried her agent. And I mean, one of her first rounds of queries, she got an offer. And on the phone with the agent, she was like, they were talking about the contract, and Cody had to say something about getting her mom to co-sign because, sorry, what? How old are you? Like the agent had no idea. And I think she went on submission and had a deal within 5 weeks. Sometimes it's just like that. So you never know, but definitely do not get discouraged if it doesn't happen the first time. I put my heart and soul into this young adult sci-fi it was the first thing I ever wrote, and I polished it. I had it beta read and everything. I queried for a year. I queried 180 agents, and they all,
Wow.
yeah. And but you just like I learned a lot from that. And the next book I wrote was a totally different genre and everything, but it was so much better. And I needed to write that first book to get to the level of that second book, which was good enough to get me an agent. So you just keep pushing. What was your experience like querying?
So maybe I'm a slow learner, or maybe just whatever it was. So it took me over a decade of querying to get picked up.
Ooh,
So I
wow.
started querying, for those who aren't old enough to remember, in the days of paper. This is where you would send out the first 5 chapters, 3 chapters in an envelope
I did a few of
with a
those.
self-addressed envelope inside that you
Yeah.
paid the postage on to send off. And this was the worst thing because you had to wait anywhere between 3 and 6 months. And then sometimes you hear this heavy thump, something comes through the letterbox. And I look at it and it's got my handwriting on. I already know what's in there. I already know this is a rejection. And that was just the worst because most of the time you just got material sent back, no response, nothing. Sometimes you get like a postcard, paper clipped on it. They'll just say, "Dear, insert name." They've written your name in, and then a printed thing about why it's not suitable. You'd be like, so I did that for years. And I wrote another book, sent it off, wrote another book, got the Writers and Artists yearbook, went through all the science fiction fancy ones. There weren't that many compared to now. Sent it off, tried a horror book, went through a Vampire and Rice thing, sent that off. I did a sci-fi book where I thought, right, so I plan all my stories. I'm just completely different. I'll do it by the seat of my pants. It'll be totally brilliant. And it was awful. It was awful. I didn't even try querying that one. It was so bad. I was like, I know that this is a complete train wreck. No. So I did, I don't know, 8 books, 9 books over 10, 11 years.
Incredible. That's not, what are you talking about? Not learning your lesson? That is persistence. That's amazing.
I'm probably the most stubborn or determined, depending which side of the fence you fall.
You gotta be.
So
you just never know. And now look, you've got the the books that are out. You've got contracts coming up. Sometimes it takes that long for it to happen.
I just wasn't ready. If I go back and look at that first book, I'll know I wasn't ready. I'll know I wasn't. Some people did get it a lot younger. So some of the authors who've got the same agent as me, they started out much younger. They're on the like 5th, 6th, 7th book now, but they started out similar to mine time to me, but they're just a few years younger than me, and they're like early 30s and stuff now. So I think the numbers are pretty low on the first book. I think generally, to answer the question, they're quite low. It depends upon the person, the work, how skilled they are to begin with. It depends on timing because you can't control that. It depends on luck, depending on what's going on in the market, the zeitgeist. There's so many things you can't control. So all you have to do is work on the things that you can control, which is make it the best you possibly can, revise it to death, and send it out. But even if that book does get picked up, that's the other thing people kind of forget. At some point, your agent and then your editor's going to turn around to you and say, "So what are you working on next?"
Yeah.
So you may as well start writing the next book now when that first one goes out on submission, because you're going to have to do it anyway.
Absolutely. I want to ask you something. 8 books that you wrote that were not published?
At least, yeah.
Do you think, would you want any of those 8 books to be published?
Probably not. I think I might cannibalize some of the ideas. Some of the concepts were probably quite good, but I'd look at it now and be like, "Oh, I wouldn't have done it that. I wouldn't do it that now. And I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't do that." And maybe the character or name, but
no. I've got a few, because even after I got an agent, I wrote a few more books that she tried to work on them with me, but I just never got them into shape to go on submission. And each and every one broke my heart, because I just thought, it was the best I could do. And it was the best I could do. But
At the
now
time.
on
Yeah.
it, I'm glad they're not out there because I can see now that they weren't ready. And I cannibalize. I have pulled apart so many of my old books for parts, like strip them for parts and work them into new, better, ideas. That's definitely, nothing is wasted. If you write a book and it doesn't get published, it was not a waste. You needed to write that book,
I got some tea and sympathy from Dolores. She said, every time I tell my career story, so she wants to cry for me.
But
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Amy, as well. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. Oh, bless him. Khan says he remembers the days of paper. Thanks, Khan.
I did
solidarity.
I did do a few snail mail queries my first time, and yeah, the price of it, oh my god, that adds up.
Agonizing.
It is.
Anyway, okay, got some more questions. We're keeping an eye on the time. Barrett asks if each of you could correct one myth about traditional publishing. I've done a lot of these. I don't know about you.
I mean, that's a great. Actually, have you done like videos on this? Because myths of traditional publishing, that does sound like a good video that I've never done.
I've done two on debunking myths.
Okay, because the first thing that came to my mind was that you're just rolling in money. People, I don't know why. People assume authors are rich. Maybe that's changing now, but I feel like when I first started out, that was the case. So yeah, I mean, obviously if you're here, that's true. If you watch either of our channels, that's not true. What are some of the ones we covered though? Because sometimes I hear that something is a myth, and I'm like, people think that about traditional publishing? What the heck?
Well, we commented on this previously when we talked about where they're talking about the differences between traditional and self-publishing, and someone had said that you have no control when you're traditionally published, that you don't have the final say on things, and that's just not true at all either. Like, you don't have final say on the text. Of course you do.
Oh my God.
Whether you're working, we said this, whether you're working with a traditional publisher or you're self-publishing, you're still going to be working with an editor, a proof editor, a cover designer. Differences with self-publishing, you're paying them. With traditional publishing, you never put your hand in your pocket at all. And it's not writing by committee. It's working with a group of skilled people who know their job on either side of that divide. So it's that myth.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I do IP work with publishers. That's much closer to writing by committee. I can tell you from personal experience, because I have done both, that it is nothing like writing a novel and selling it to a publisher. That is not writing by committee. I mean, like, I don't understand it. And I don't understand it as an argument that's like pro self-publishing if you're trying to choose between the two, because if you're self-publishing, ostensibly you are going to hire an editor and a copy editor and a committee of people. It's the same process. It's just in one you're not paying for it, and in the other you're paying for it. That's
So why wouldn't you listen to the expert? Whether if you're self-published and you've hired an editor and they say, "Oh, I think you should change this," and you go, "No, I won't do any of that." I'm like, "Well, why did you pay them? What did you paid for expertise, and you're just ignoring them? Why?"
And if you are going back to TridePub, if you have when you have an editor, you don't have to take every suggestion. No. You can talk. Most editors, okay. Every once in a while, you hear a story about an editor or a house that wanted like really double down on a change they wanted in a book that maybe an author wasn't so excited about. But the vast majority of the time, they're working with you. It's your book and your vision, and they're trying to help make the book the best version of that vision that it can be. And when you're done editing and when you're done like including copy edits, that's all. You decide when it's finished. It really is up to you. Even with copy edits, you can stet, which means basically reject a copy edit change. I will say this. I've heard of a lot of editors being like stet, because they don't like any of the changes. And I fundamentally disagree with that. Copy editors have a very specialized job. I respect the hell out of them. If they made the change, there's probably a real good reason. So like give it, but my point is, it's up to you as the author. It is still your book.
Yeah.
I don't get that at all. That's a really good myth that I don't even know if I was aware of when I first came into the industry, because I was so eager to work with an editor. I wanted somebody to like an agent to like take my book and help me, give me advice, make me, maybe it's because I'm a teacher and I just see it as Like they're not whipping out the red pen and scribbling out all the crap you got wrong. They're helping
Yeah,
you. They're just
yeah.
making it better.
So
That's a really good.
I was quite lucky because I got to meet my agent. I know a lot of people don't because they're not in the same country or state or whatever it might be. So my agent is in London. I went down and she said she'd like to represent me, but she wanted to talk about the book and she had some ideas for things to improve it. So I went to London and sat with her like an hour and a half, and we talked through, like she said, I think this needs work, you need to work on this and work on that. And everything she said made sense to me. None of it was like so radical. I would have gone, no. And if she'd completely steered me off in the opposite direction to what the purpose of my book was, I would have gone, maybe she's not the right fit for me. And that's, even though I've got an agent offering representation, it sounds the worst thing you should do at that point when you've been hunting one for so long, that suddenly they offer you representation. But if they're taking a book and they're changing it so fundamentally from yours, that's when you have to kind of say no.
Right.
But
I can think of one instance where an author I knew, from my point of view, and I was only hearing her side of the things, granted, but from my point of view, the editor and the imprint acquired her book in a very big deal. And then what she went through with edits, it was a case of they were pretty much forcing some big changes that she did not want. But she went along with because it was her first book deal. And it became clear that the imprint was trying to create another version of another publisher's hype book out of her book. That's so rare. Please don't let it freak you out. And it did piss me off because to me it was like, that should have been an IP project. The publisher should have just been like, oh, we want to create a blah 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 ripoff. Here's a pitch. Let's hire a writer. They should have only acquired this girl's book if they wanted that book.
Yeah,
that version of that book, and not trying to morph it into another version of another hit. If that makes sense. But again, that's the only. I can only think of one instance of that happening.
Yeah.
And it's just not, I mean, I've worked with a whole lot of editors at a lot of different imprints, and they're always on your side. They just want to help you make your book better. And you have the final say. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The more I think about this, the more it irritates.
See, it's it bugs me so much. So I've done 2 videos on myths. And one of them was me pretty much. I went to a panel, I was copying down what the editors and the agents were saying, and I put that into the video. And some people still disagreed with me. I'm like, this isn't me saying it. This is what I've written down, the agents and editors. And they're like, that's not true. I'm like, oh God. Anyway, it annoys me. Let's move on. I'll stay on this all night. Laura has asked, I've heard it's gotten harder to get an agent over the past year or so. Is there some truth to that?
The pandemic slowed things down from my perspective. I mean, that's what I was hearing from everyone. However, it's still happening. And, I know, okay, Lindsay Puckett is another author tuber who is traditionally published. Do you know Lindsay?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, you should follow her. She queried for a long time. If anybody in the chat remembers how long, please let me know. And she queried during the pandemic and I think in her video, she said she was pretty much ready to give up on this book because she had queried enough agents. And then she was like, one more round. And that was the round. And she found her agent. And then not only did she get a deal, she went to auction. And her debut comes out this fall with Scholastic. And it looks very good. And I'm just really excited to read it. It's middle grade. It looks like my kind of book. So it does still happen. And one of my closest friends is in the same situation I am in, where she is now looking for a new agent, or she was, and she started querying during the pandemic as well. And yes, it took, and she has quite a backlist of pretty successful books under her belt, and it did still take her 7 months, but she got a great agent and she's on submission right now. And I think it's going to turn out really well for her. So it's, publishing finding an agent is always just going to be filled with rejection. And I don't even think there's any point to being like, well, things are still slow because of this, and publishing is, it's just write the best book you can, polish the crap out of your query, and go for it. That's it. I don't think there's even point in speculating. You might strike gold. You might get an offer right away. I mean, it does happen.
Yeah.
How is it over on your side? I mean, are we going through the same thing? Do you feel slower?
I think so. Things definitely changed and things got bumped because of the pandemic. So originally, The Coward was going to come out in 2020.
Mhm.
And that year was whole kind of everything was up in the air. No one really knew what was going to go on. A lot of publishers also had books set up and they thought, we'll just hold on to them for now and see what happens. And it made sense. And I'm glad they did, because some people, they were too far down the process. Their books had to come out. They were pretty much, the arcs were ready. They'd printed them. The warehouse couldn't hold the books. So they had to come out in 2020. And that was such a weird year for anybody who debuted during that year. No physical events. Everything was starting to go online, but it wasn't really the way it is now that we've got hybrid conventions and things. It was just so bizarre.
Yeah.
But I think people are starting to get back to normal-ish now. But I think it's just a lot of pressure. Some people left the industry. So a lot of people changed jobs. We've seen stories recently about people in publishing going and all these kind of issues. I think it's more difficult. I think it is, but that equally it shouldn't stop you, because it's only a fraction more difficult than what it was before, because it was never easy. So
it was never easy. Yeah, no, that's the thing. And you know what? We can put a positive spin on this as well. Like there has been a ton of burnout. I can't even. I think the vast majority of the editors I have worked with on my own books and on IP projects, it's a lot of editors over the last 10 years. I think 2-3 of them are still where they were. I mean, I feel like, especially over the last 2 years, 4 editors I was working with from like 2019 and 2020 emailed me to let me know that they were leaving the house, and they were all going into just either like being stay-at-home moms or freelance editing. But the bright side of that is it's not like their seats are vacant. That means that like newer editors who are hungry and new and like building a list and active, they're excited and they want to find their first authors. That's a great place to be in. And it's the same with agents.
Yes.
Getting an experienced agent, obviously we don't need to go over what the pros of that are, but the cons of that are they might have some big clients or just a large list, and you might not be a super top priority. Whereas when you sign with a newer agent, they are hungry. They want that deal as much as you do, and they're going to be working for you, So it's the same with editors. They're looking, they're excited, and it's fun to be part of a newer editors building their own list, I think, at an imprint. So, you can put a positive spin on that. Also, I have to pause, Stephen, and say, yep. You hit 1,000 subscribers.
Hey, we're waiting for it to roll over from 999 to 1,000. Thanks, whoever my 1,000th one is.
Yeah, I don't know who 1,000 was, but thank you, whoever hit that button.
Thanks for that. The other positive thing is that there's the social media aspect as well, because a lot of these people a lot of these agents and editors will be going on to social media, onto Twitter in particular, and they all talk. So even if you're not active on Twitter, even if you only create the account just to gather news, use it as a resource, use it as something that's valuable to follow as many of the editors that you can find, right, and the agents. And that's the other thing. Most authors will probably say who their agent is on their website or somewhere at the back of the book. You can find the information there, and then you can find who else is on their list to try and create a list for yourself of who would be a good fit for you. So that's something you could try. Same with editors. Look at what they're representing. Look at what they're interested in. And if you don't want to post on Twitter or anything like that, just try and use it as another kind of resource, and it can be really useful for that. So someone might say, like the manuscript wish list, or the agent might say, right, my list is now open, because they close obviously for periods of time when they're trying to catch up with the slush pile.
Right.
So yeah, it's a good thing.
It is.
Yeah. Quick question from Anna here. I'm writing a fantasy series set in multiverse, but book 1 is standalone. Should I tell the agent while querying or for signing, or would you advise to self-publish? So last question first. I'd only self-publish if you want to. That shouldn't be a knee-jerk reaction to, because if you want to go traditionally published, we've said you don't pay anything. If it's traditionally published, all the money flows to you from everybody else. As self-published, all the money flows from you out to editors, cover artists, and everything else. So that's only self-published if you really want control of absolutely everything, and you're willing to pay for it, and you have the time and the resources to do that. Set in a multiverse, it's standalone. So the catchphrase at the moment that they seem to like is standalone with series potential. That's buzzwords. That's the thing. So if you say it's standalone but with series potential, that's great, because they can buy a 1-book series, and if it does well, have you got any more? Well, yes, I have actually. Here's another 2 or 3 or 4 books, and they're all standalone. that's the key thing. And someone else, I've missed it now, but someone else was saying, is it better to go with a shorter series now in fantasy when you're pitching? And my gut tells me at the moment, because it's very crowded and very difficult, anything longer than a trilogy is a very hard sell right now in fantasy.
Yeah.
I think this is my perspective, because it would have to be something spectacular. Because even if you say it's a 12-book series, okay, they'll probably sign you for the first 3. And if they don't do well, they're not picking up the rest. And you've got the rest just sat there and you haven't got a complete story. So standalone with series potential, great. A trilogy, possible. Yes. How is it with middle grade? Is it all the same sort of thing of standalone with series potential?
That's the advice I was going to say, because that's what was told to me. And now that I think about it, the book that I wrote that I did sign with an agent, I wrote it as a standalone. I think she pitched it as a standalone with series potential. And the offer we got that was rescinded was that editor was like, they wanted it to be a trilogy. So we spent 2 weeks coming up with a proposal for book 2 until we found out that we didn't have a deal after all. So that was not that I'm still bitter 10 years later, but yeah, I think that's the way to do it. I'm working on a book proposal for a client right now who's going to go on submission in July, and it could be a duology, but we're writing the outline so that the end is going to be like, either this is, there's closure. I think that's the bottom line. You want to show that the book 1 has closure. You can't leave everything totally open-ended, because especially if you're a debut, you kind of have to prove that you can do that. You can tell a complete story. You have an ending. And then you leave the ending open in a way that's like, there could be more to this story, if you're interested, but there doesn't have to be. I think that's kind of the key right there, and that's what we're working on too.
Yeah. So I technically have done it both ways. So I've done 2 trilogies with Orbit. My first trilogy, all 3 books are technically standalone, but they all build on each other and they have to be read in order. And they're all quite different fields. So I did it that way, and some people complained about that. And on my second trilogy, it's one huge story cut into 3, and some people complained about that because it wasn't a complete story. So you can't win. All you can kind of do is just do what you feel is right and go with that and hope for the best. So
agreed. Very good advice.
can't please everybody all of the time. No. So, a good question from Amy. Would either of us ever suggest paying for a professional editor to help improve our writing?
You know what? If you have the money and you really want to put the money into it, then I mean, sure, you're gonna learn something. You can find, like I said, so many editors have moved out of publishing houses and are freelancing now. Hiring someone who has experience in the industry to look at your book, you're gonna get a lot out of that. It's gonna be worth your money. But I want to make it clear, you absolutely do not have to do that to succeed at this. I didn't do it. I never paid
never
for anything before I was published. So it's not necessary. But again, if you think that would be money well spent for you and you can afford it, let me know if you want some recommendations, because I know some editors.
There you go. Yeah. If you think it's that thing of, if you don't have people who can give you constructive feedback, people who can give you useful feedback, if it's just your friends and family and they're not writers and they just kind of go, oh, well, I like this, that doesn't help me. I don't like that. Well, that doesn't help me either. So if you're just struggling to find a group, a community online, then, or you don't understand some of the fundamentals, maybe an editor would be a good place to go. But as we said, neither of us have done it yet. Well, we don't need to now, but yeah, we've never done it.
Yeah. Not
okay. What are lead times on average when you've been on contract? How long have most of your books taken between selling a book and seeing it on the shelves?
Let's see. The longest I ever waited between getting an offer on a book and a contract was 9 months. I know some people who have waited longer, and that includes a payment, because usually the first payment, for me anyway, comes a month or 2 months after you sign the contract. So almost a year is the longest I've ever waited. I would say probably, I should actually do the math on this one day, but I feel like on average, I've probably waited 4 to 5 months for a contract and first payment for every book. And then between selling a book and seeing it on shelves, I think my average there is a year and a half. My books always get bumped. Always. Almost, I mean, I can't think of a single one that came out on time.
Any particular reason, or just
It's different every time.
right?
Like obviously the last several have been because of the pandemic. I mean, and I wasn't upset about it. It happened to pretty much everybody, I think. My first book deal was because it was with Penguin, but they were going to be in the Scholastic Clubs and Fair, and I think it was just something about what like fall or spring, which is better school wise, and they
Right.
kept around like at first they were going to have it be even earlier than they first said, and then they pushed it back. I don't know. It was a lot. The second series was with that same imprint, so they bumped it in accordance with the first series being bumped. Um, my other books, honestly, I had that series with it's with Little Brown now, but it was I actually sold it to Disney Hyperion, and then a couple of years ago, Disney Hyperion offloaded all of their books that weren't like Disney IP onto Little Brown. It was a very weird situation, but when
Mm.
Hyperion bought that series, they promised it lead title status, and the same thing happened with Penguin Random House with that two-book deal I was talking about earlier, Spell and Spindle and Olive, and at some point they just I don't there's stuff going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. I don't think it was anything I did on my end, but they both had big marketing plans, and then I guess some new shiny author came in or something else took precedent, and the pub date got bumped and the editors were late with their notes, and I would just like push down on the priority list. I think it was just as simple as that, really. Have you experienced that at all, or did all your stuff come out on time?
It's all been pretty good for coming out on
That's
time.
fine.
Um,
Score
it's,
one for the UK.
well, I guess it's the fantasy thing of sometimes they're quite careful and they create their list anyway. So my first book's all about majors and all the rest of it. And obviously, if there's someone else on the same list at the same publisher, they're going to space it by at least 6 months. So they're constantly thinking about those kind of things, and they're working 12 to 24 months ahead usually.
Yeah.
They've never been bumped, no. So it's how long between selling a book and seeing on the shelves? For me, it's same as you, about a year, I would say, from when I sign the contract to when it comes out. So when we start talking to the editor and we start talking about a deal, the contract will come in a few months. But I'm already probably talking to the editor about what we're going to be doing with the book and thoughts about it and ideas. And then once it's signed, they will let me know in the contract. It will say the first book will come out roughly this time, a year later this time, a year later this time. So I know ahead of time. So it isn't a surprise. So it's one book a year on average. So I've had a book out every year on average. No, since 2015, I've had a book out every year apart from 2020. And that's just because we know when it's going to be coming out. We know deadlines. We know my deadlines. We know I've got to hand it in. And so many months through the cycle of editing process, and out pops a book. So
Right.
that's how it's kind of worked so far. And it's been okay.
That's
okay. How many queries should you send before you shelve your manuscript and move it on to something new?
ooh. That's a really good question. And I don't know about you, but I feel like the answer to that is it really depends on how much are you willing to edit and adjust and learn from the rejections. You know what I mean? Like if you've polished the heck out of this thing and you really feel like it's just as good as you can get it, then you might want to set a lower number. But I know a lot of authors who have had a lot of success with querying in very, very small batches and waiting, as hard as this is, waiting for those rejections to come, some of them with feedback, taking that feedback and really reworking the query, and in some cases, even reworking the book. If you see a pattern in your rejections, if you get agents who give you specific reasons, for mine, on my first book, I didn't have the patience. But now looking back on it, what I should have done was I was getting a lot of feedback about the plot's really cool and the premise is cool, but the characters are super flat. Can't really connect to them. It was multi POV. They all kind of sound the same.
Right.
Same thing over and over again. And to be honest, I didn't know how to fix that. And so I didn't. But now, like, if I was advising somebody now, if I were working with somebody, I was like, this is what we need to do. We need to like do a revision and focus on voice and focus on character development. Everything else is cool, So it really just depends on how much you want to work on your book more and how much you're willing to do. Because, yeah, I think it's a personal call. What do you think?
Yeah, if you love the book and you still think it has potential and you still think it has legs and you want to, I mean, rejections hurt, but even now, they would still hurt. It's not something you ever kind of just be like, oh, that's fine. You take a little time and you move on. That's all I did. That's the only reason I was able to keep going. I just kind of had to take some time out and then keep going. But if you, as you said, do it in batches, if you learn something from it and you can improve it. But if you keep getting the same feedback and you think, actually, yeah, I don't think this is my best work, or I've got something better, go on to the next project, learn from that first one, take everything you've gained from that first one and inject it into that new book. This is true, but it's so awful to say. With every book that you write, you will get better. It's like anything else; it's a muscle.
Yeah.
And if I look back at my first book now, there's probably things in there that would make me cringe.
Same.
But I'm not going to look back. So I'm not going to revise it either. I'm not going to do like some people have done. They've got so big, they've gone back to their first book and kind of tweak them. I'm like, I'm not doing that. But yeah, it's just, if you can learn from that first book or the rejections, you get anything useful from it, take what you can and put it into the next one. If you've exhausted the list, say there's 30 agents of fantasy and you've gone down the list, that's it. You burned all the bridges. You can't resend that novel again, no matter how much you revise it. That's another question I've had. Someone said, well, I've done a massive edit on book. Can I send it to the same agents again? It's like, no, you had one shot and that was it. Unless the agent has specifically said, I would be willing to look at this again if you revise it.
Exactly.
That sometimes happens. I'm not saying it often, sometimes. But that's the only reason you get to send the same manuscript to the same agent. Otherwise, that's it. That bridge is gone. You have to go on to the next project. That's the name of the game.
Yep. All true.
This one's for you, really. Any advice for middle grade horror? How to determine appropriate scare intensity? How detailed go in descriptions with the scare scenes, etc.?
Really? Okay. So, I mean, the most important thing is to read as much middle grade horror as you can. And there are different types of middle grade horror. Like there's some that it's like the kind of, I don't want to say it's not blood and gore because you don't ever really get a lot of that with middle grade, but kind of like the Fear Street, R.L. Stine kind of scary. And then there's more like Neil Gaiman, Coraline, creepy, scary. So really just read a lot of middle grade horror, identify the books that you would consider, that you would compare what you want your book to be like, or if you've written it, what you would consider to be comp titles. And the scare intensity thing, that's really just, it really depends. You can go pretty hard. Kids like scary books. I read horror when I was a kid. It was my favorite genre. Definitely keep in mind that I made this choice with some of because I have a couple of middle grade horrors and I made this choice. You're going to get some librarians and some teachers and some parents who read the book before the kid, because they should, before they recommend it to a child. And they might find some of what the scary, they might find it to be too much or even inappropriate. Like one of my books, includes, the main character's like part of her backstory, and part of what's kind of haunting her through this is that her father committed suicide previous to the start of the book. And for some people and for some kids, that's too dark and that's too much. And I accept that. And I think maybe if I didn't have that book could have potentially reached a slightly wider audience, but that doesn't mean it didn't really resonate with some of the kids who did read it. So it's really just a personal choice. Laura, I would just say read a lot in the genre and really identify the ones that are the kind of horror that you're going for, and read them analytically. Like how scary is it in all the ways, like kind of psychologically, but also in terms of just like, is there blood? Is there gore? Is it more like ghosts, or, what's scary about it? How scary do you think it is? If you were to rate it, what would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't know. That's what I think.
Yeah. It's advice I'd give to anybody whenever they're going to submit a book within that genre. You should be reading within that genre. Yes. You should know the industry. It's so weird. I constantly kind of struggle with this. My day job background is business, and I always thought that's the worst thing and it'd be the most useless thing for kind of being a writer. It actually turns out to be incredibly useful
That's
and not just the money side and everything else, but thinking about it analytically. So the sort of thinking, where would my book sit on the shelf? What's it like? Who is it comparable to? Because you have to do comparison titles.
Yes.
So you have to know the industry. You have to know your genre. You have to know who the big boys and girls that are selling well. And when you're comparing your book, it has to be something that's been published within the last 3 years, 5 years at a push. So you can't sort of say, oh, my book's like Stranger in a Strange Land. I'm like, that was published in the 1960s, I think. That's not really, really useful as a comparison. So, yes, read middle grade horror, learn where the thresholds are. Same for everybody else, for fantasy or science fiction, whatever it might be. Just know your genre before you start wading into it, really. I think that's important.
Definitely.
Question about beta readers here. Any advice on getting past the beta stage reason? Questioning every word.
Welcome to the club, CEO. That's I mean, that often I think happens sometimes when you get beta reader feedback, and if you're getting beta reader feedback on 2 books at once, that's kind of probably an overload for your brain. I think it is totally normal to have those thoughts. If you're looking at when you say trademark preferences, you're basically talking about trends. I wouldn't take that into consideration so much that it majorly messes with the premise and heart of your books. You don't want to play to trends in that way because, as we have discussed, publishing is super slow right now. And for all you know, even if you got a book deal tomorrow, your book would be coming out in like 2025. And who knows? I mean, who knows what it's going to be, what it's going to look like then. And that's one thing where manuscript wishlist is so great. I'm so glad it exists. And I think it's really fun and interesting to see what agents want. But also, I wouldn't put too much stock into it. Because, and I see agents say this sometimes, and it makes me happy. They're like, they'll add, but the thing I want most is the thing that's just going to surprise me that I don't even know that I want.
Yes, I really love it.
Be that
thing. Yeah, be that thing where it's so different or so unexpected. They go, I never saw that coming. This is so good. I love it. That's what you want.
Yep.
As for the kind of word-to-word thing, know that your book is going to be revised. Even when you've polished it within an inch of its life and you're happy with it, if you get to that stage and you send it off, know that it's still going to be edited. Not saying it's going to be torn apart, but it will change. There will be some changes. It's all the stuff you've missed, but equally all the things they say, this needs work, that needs work, whether it's characters, whether it's clarity of story, because I've had plot lines in some of my earlier books. They've said, this one's quite interesting, but it doesn't gel with the rest of the book. Is it vital to the main part of the plot? And on reflection, I've realized no, but it was an interesting aside, so that got stripped out. And that was, 10, 12,000 words of 130,000, 140,000 word novel. Didn't really matter, didn't make a huge difference. But don't be worrying too much about the punctuation and the grammar, especially at the beta reading stage. It's all about slightly higher stuff, the characters, the world building, the plot, the pace, all these kind of things. If they're picking up punctuation, grammar, and all the rest of it, that's fine. Just make the changes and move on and forget about all of that. And word choice as well. I think that's it's something for later.
Yes, agreed.
Right. We've got time for one more question, and then we're going to wrap this up. Here's one from Barrett. What question would you both recommend us asking when it is our turn for the call with an agent? I think does he mean when we actually have that face-to-face call with them? Or
you're getting a call, you're probably going to get an offer. You're interviewing the agent. What do you ask them? This is really funny because my agent retired last year, so I'm going to be querying sometime in the somewhat foreseeable future. So I should know this. I mean, definitely the first thing that came to my mind is tell me your notes on my book. Because if they don't have any notes, I'm going to be a little bit skeptical. I like an editorial agent. And when I got my first agent, I had 2 offers. And a huge part of the reason I signed with who I signed with is because she was an editor before she was an agent. That was most of her career. And when I asked the first agent, what are your notes? She said something along the lines of, oh, this and that, but I think it's pretty close to ready to go. And Sarah, the agent I signed with, was like, let me tell you. I was like, that's what I want. That is what I want. I want an editor.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
My question would be, what is their vision for for the book that you've sent them? So not just what changes, it's where do they see it sitting on the shelves? Where do they see it? So if I sent in a really gritty, dirty, low fantasy novel that's quite kind of adult, and they sort of say, well, I think this is quite a funny, light fantasy with heart, and we can make it this, and we can change the tone. It's like, no, that's the question you ask. What if they're on the same wavelength and they understand what you're trying to do and they get the vision of the book?
mm-hmm.
That's the kind of thing I would ask. Be like, where do you think this book sits on the shelf? What do you want? What do you see it similar to? And if they get it,
you can also ask them, like, where do you see putting it on submission? What imprints come to mind? It doesn't have to give you a sub list like right there, but if they're offering to represent you, they've probably already thought of it, and it's completely okay to ask. Because you might have some places in mind where you think it would be, like where you would like it to be. So you want to hear what they have to say, and maybe, if that lines up, or if they have some suggestions that you hadn't thought of.
Yeah. And the other thing is, so I worked on my first novel with my agent for like a year on and off editing it. During that time, she was warming up various editors. She told me that we're going to submit to these publishers, and I knew that. But during those 12 months, she'd been talking to the editors, kind of saying, "Oh, I'm working with this so and so. He's got this new book about this, that, and the other." And then every few months, those editors would be coming back to my agent, going, "So where are we with this book?" And kind of warming them up. So it's that kind of thing. You want someone who's on the ball and is really engaged.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, that was a good question to end on, I think.
All good questions.
They've all been really good questions, to be honest. We're going to talk about some other things. We didn't get time to it because we just kind of answered all your questions. But
you guys were great. Thanks for doing our work for us.
Basically, yeah. I've got notes. I haven't referred to them more than once. So thanks everyone for doing that. Thanks for all the questions. But this was fun. It was really good. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed it and got some useful information from it. Thank you, Michelle, for coming on. It was nice to finally talk to you, face to face-ish.
Yes. Congrats on 1,000 subs. I'm so happy.
Yay! And watch it drop down to 999 tomorrow, I'm sure.
It's YouTube, so probably, yeah.
Yeah, I subscribe for the thing. I'm going now. Okay, bye, everyone. Right. Okay, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and we might do some more of these in the future.
Yeah, that would be great.
And we'll see you soon. Good night, everyone. Good night.